Joining us on the line, Dr. Azar Jammine, Chief Economist at Econometrics, and we have Adil Ntshabeleng. He's the President of Transform RSA. Good evening. Welcome back, Adil. Let's start with Dr. Jammine. Good evening to you, and thanks so much for joining us. I mean, how does this argument hold that, businesses are stashing 1.4 trillion rand because of lack of policy guidance or whatever reason there is, Dr. Jammine, especially when the South African socio-economic needs are so dire?
The fact is that business invests with the objective of making a profit. And in the current environment, with the kind of policy uncertainty that exists, there is uncertainty about whether or not they can make a profit by investing in new ventures. So what one is tending to find is that businesses do the minimum amount of investment in order to keep their businesses running domestically, and are using any of the surpluses that they've got either to invest in financial markets and make a bigger return that way, or alternatively to invest in foreign countries where they feel that they can make more money. And more generally, it's been a case of investing abroad rather than domestically. This is not to say that there is no investment being undertaken. I think the real problem is that the growth in investment is just insufficient to actually stimulate the country's overall economic growth. But it's really a function of a lack of confidence and a lack of policy certainty.
Dr. Jammine, just stay on the line. We have Mr. Ntshabeleng. Just your response on this policy uncertainty, and it's become even more louder since the appointment of a new finance minister.
I think the issue of policy uncertainty, I've been hearing it for over the last 10 years. It's not a new argument. It's been an old excuse that was used to deflect from the real issues. South Africa's policies is very clear. We've got broad-based black economic empowerment policy. We've got policies within the various sectors. We've got charters in the various sectors. We've got rules, laws, and regulations of companies entering and operating within the South African economy and market. So to say that there is no policy certainty is disingenuous. Let's talk about the issues that mostly are actually affecting our economy. There's issues relating to, one, the regulatory framework by which you can enforce our policy. A lot of these companies that are not compliant with South African policies, particularly on the financial level, are relating to regulatory framework, which they are refusing, by the way, to comply to. So I don't buy the argument that South Africa does not have policy certainty. There's a lot of policy frameworks that has been implemented. We are a country that specializes in making policies and laws which in effect never gets to be implemented and thoroughly actually successfully implemented in the economy. So the policies are there, but companies have found a new sort of dogma of running away from fulfilling the policy requirements. Remember, for any organization to trade in a country of sovereignty and particular need, there are certain laws that must be followed. So whenever companies hit into a snag, for instance, the issue of black economic empowerment, there is always an issue of certainty. They said, no, we want to change the laws because they are not actually benefiting our interests. So policy certainty is an old argument which actually, I think we should just turn that page and start talking of a new policy regulatory framework that says that there must be radical economic transformation on the backbone of making sure that these companies that are hoarding this huge amount of money, 1.4 trillion, if deployed into this economy, will make a significant change and will give these companies huge amount of profits.
Yeah, Tony Modise is a market commentator. Thanks so much for joining us, Tony. I mean, how do you reconcile that if you look at economies like Zimbabwe, for example, that has grown much more substantially than what the local economic growth forecast is, and clearly there's sanctions, there's all sorts of political instability. How then, with such a sophisticated economy as South Africa, are we not performing at that level?
Cindy, thank you. Thank you for having me. Our challenges are quite specific. These companies we're supposed to be using these reserves that they have to invest back into the economy. And I really don't agree with the gentleman over there.
Tony?
If there wasn't uncertainty, we wouldn't have been downgraded. Right now, what the challenges that we're having is, we are having the challenges of the new thing that is happening within the South African economy, that is low business confidence and also low investors' confidence. Hence, it's quite challenging for these companies to really put in funds into new projects within the country, because what happens is there's uncertainty in terms of there's something that might happen that there's no surety of which these funds might be used in future to preserve the shocks of what might happen in South African economy.
Yeah.
When we look in economies like other economies that you just mentioned, the situation there is, remember, they are the upcoming economy. They are still trying to survive. They're still trying to come out of what happened. Us, we are just getting into it. We just starting to experience all of these things that our South African economy is experiencing now. Hence, it's quite a big challenge for these companies to really put in funds.
Yeah, well, Adil doesn't buy it, Tony. He says, that has been an old script that has been regurgitated.
I mean, really, when we've been 23 years into democracy, and we cannot keep on talking about low investors.
Tony,
we would have been downgraded.
Okay, he says we are.
We are downgraded because of that issue.
All right, hold on.
Tony, I think let's maybe be very clear. Downgrades have been happening in countries where certain countries buy themselves out of downgrade reports. Remember, these companies that are downgrading and upgrading destinations, investment destinations, are companies that are paid. Why main companies, as well as the economy of the U.S., was never downgraded at 2007 when they hit into an economic crisis? And we know some of these companies, Fitch as well as Standard & Poor, always have a reason why they particularly apply the element of a downgrading or an upgrading of investment destination. So please do not lie to us and the viewers particularly. We are very clear. From a Transform RSA point of view, we have already done our work. Remember, all we do every day is to research, is to analyze, is to critique, is to understand where policy is moving towards and understand the economic movement within South Africa. So at that point, one, he raised the issue of saying there is no investors' confidence and there is no business confidence. And yet you have 1.4 trillion sitting in business bank accounts with no investors' confidence. Why didn't they take that money out of this country? If there was no investor uncertainty, if there is no certainty in South Africa, this particular government, if it collapses tomorrow, what's going to happen to the 1.4 trillion that is sitting in people's bank accounts? So they mustn't give us all this, hogwash of telling us that there is no business as well as investors' confidence. It is a trick to keep our economy halted and almost at a shutdown level. We must now start really saying what is the truth in our economy.
All right, Tony, please, before you respond, Dr. Azza Jammeh is also with us on the line. Just your response in the trickery or the scapegoating that, our panelists or Adil is saying government, or rather business, is employing to try and wait for the conducive or pristine time to invest as opposed to dealing with the issues facing this nation.
I find it rather strange that one should expect businesses or any person to invest if he doesn't want to. You cannot force him to do so. And yes, you may be right that in terms of uncertainty, maybe that's the wrong word that is used, that maybe it's the regulations that are dissuading these companies from investing. But you cannot force them to invest if they don't want to. Yes, that money is lying around there. The only way in which to get it is to basically take it and then do what you will with that money. But you will find that in the longer term there is no follow-through and the economy would then collapse completely. Companies are not holding the country to ransom by not investing. Anyone who tries to do any business does so in order to try and profit for himself. He's not going to withhold making a profit if the opportunity is there for him to do so. It's just that it doesn't exist at the moment. And it's been a general decline. And there is a total lack of confidence in the economy at the moment. How do you force someone to deploy his money if he doesn't have confidence.
Yeah.
He's scared he's going to lose the money, and so he'd rather just put it in the bank and make sure that he gets the best return available from the bank in that circumstance.
Yeah, Tony, if you're still on the line, and I think what the expectation and the hype has been around the second transition, or having a more inclusive economic environment, and dealing with the nature of how colonial structures of the economy had been, being part of the management and of operations beyond just employment, is where we are. In short, the radical economic transformation desires and where business is at the moment. And I think I'm asking for charitable or philanthropic answers here, Tony, which doesn't work in business. Hi, Tony. Yeah, all right.
Hello?
I think. Oh, hi. Are you still there?
I think maybe
Hello?
just help you send it.
Yeah, we're just going to have to repatch you, Tony. I can't hear you directly, but can you hear us? Nope.
Maybe just to help you, Cindy. South Africa is the most stable economic destination. If there was a civil war in South Africa, these companies would not knowing that there's going to be anything that is going to disrupt their profits, they would not be building the kind of buildings and developments that are happening in major headquarter cities, from Cape Town to Durban to Johannesburg, which is now the major developments are happening in Sandton, which is, by the way, the concentration of over 60 to 80% of South Africa's trade as well as economy. So why would they be investing so much amounts of monies in all of those developments when there is no business confidence in South Africa? Yes, they are going through a phase which we call a harvesting phase, where you don't necessarily need to reinvest into business, by the way, in order to make those amounts of profits. All you do is you're harvesting the already investment made in an economy over a period of time. So over the last 10 years or so, there are money that was deployed as capital into various operations, particularly the financial sectors and other related retail sectors, are now paying off very well. And with little or minimum reinvestment, you're making more money. So why is there a need for them to go into another spending? The other layer is we are almost behind on every level of development in South Africa. Our IT infrastructure, which is broadband, fiber optic, telecommunications infrastructure, is not even of a third world nature, is already of an obsolete nature. We are still running with a 3G, where we are supposed to have already moved into the highest level of technology. There is no such investment in bulk amounts, whereby we are starting to see the opening up and the competitive market where various players can come and start playing. We have the digital economy that has not come into place. You have the retail as well as property infrastructure that has not come into place. The housing market, there is a massive market gap with regards to providing middle class people who are earning a decent income, who cannot necessarily afford a 2 million rand house or a 1 million rand house. They are looking for gap housing. Any housing from around 250,000 to around 550,000 in order to start off their lives. The majority of our population is young people and youth who are between the age of 18 and 35. Most of them cannot even afford to buy a house. So if you're telling me that there are no opportunities in South Africa, you'll have to convince us. Yeah. The opportunities are there, but there is no will, particularly at this stage, to deploy that particular capital and income. And one maybe, we must actually apply ourselves and say, from a really analytical point of view, we must ask, is it because they are trying to punish the ANC government by ensuring that money is hoarded and withheld? And as a result, when the ANC government fails to deliver on the various practical policies that they have made to transform this economy, thereafter, the new dispensation and regime that comes into place is going to be given this capital in order to support the economic growth and rapid economic transformation.
Let's get Dr. Jamin, you can't divorce the political nature and especially when it comes to business influencing decisions made in government to protect their investment. But shouldn't we look at the methodology of determining whether there's business confidence, this whole policy uncertainty, by scrutinizing the various agencies, as we've seen with the rating agencies They themselves had fallen from grace, if you will, in various countries as well. We've seen auditing firms also being implicated in shoddy business practices. So why do we still peddle the whole argument that there's lack of policy certainty, lack of business confidence, when this is just a very small sample of the country's economy that's being targeted?
I think you need to look back at the history, the recent history of the economy and the way in which the government has indeed tried to cooperate with the private sector, and you'll see that major initiatives were undertaken by former Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan to improve that relationship, and there was enormous progress being made in that regard. And there were a whole lot of new initiatives that were being put into place. And those were completely scuppered overnight by a cabinet reshuffle that replaced the Minister of Finance. That destroyed a lot of the confidence of the private sector in wanting to cooperate with the government. Many just lost all hope. And that, I fear, might exacerbate the investment strike that we are seeing. New Finance Minister Gigaba has tried to embark upon an initiative to try and rebuild that confidence, but many businessmen ask, well, why was former Minister Pravin Gordhan replaced if he was doing such a, was he doing such a bad job in terms of rebuilding those relations? Now we have a new Minister of Finance, and the question is, why was he put into place when the former Minister of Finance was actually acquiring a huge amount of confidence and respect from the private sector business community?
Just to add on what Dr. Jamane is saying, we usually refrain from really entering into political personality contests. That's one of our positions. So we really don't really much comment on individuals. Here we're talking about business fundamentals. We have 1.6 trillion that is supposed to be circulating in the South African economy in terms of rents, in terms of paper currency, as well as coins production. Most of that money, if it is not circulating, it is sitting in a bank in terms of a savings and everything. So if 1.4 right now is sitting within companies on a savings account, which means the economy has been starved of income, which means there is no currency circulating in order to create brand new opportunities and brand new businesses. There's only about 200 billion that is currently moving within the economy, which is an starved economy. So at some point, there has to be a regulatory framework from the Reserve Bank that says, how do we unlock this value that needs to be unlocked? And it comes back to the condition of saying, why must the mandate of the Reserve Bank be revised? Because the Reserve Bank is supposed to be regulating the currency movement, the flow of the money, as well as looking at the inflation. Inflation is at the highest level as it is today. But yet, companies can sit with massive amounts of profit. So I'm too skeptical about the debate of saying that this minister, that minister. Let's talk about the economic fundamentals of South Africa. Is there a shortage of money in our economy? Yes, there is a shortage of money because a lot of it is banked and saved. Is there a shortage of opportunities? No. There are massive opportunities that are never realized. So as a result, there is a disjuncture here, which then brings us to the conclusion to say the ruling party, which is the ANC, has a far deeper task to go and confront and interrogate the current business community that is sitting with these huge sums of amounts of money and asking them in terms of their corporate responsibility as being a corporate citizen in South Africa. They are benefiting out of these profits. They are making obscene amounts of money by enjoying the South African spend and dividend. What are they doing to plow back that income into South Africa? All other countries do that. In the UK, you cannot take your money and stuff it and then say you are going to stuff the United Kingdom's economy. You cannot do it in China. You cannot do it in Russia. You cannot do it even in Zimbabwe. And yet in our economy, it's done. Certain things must change. And in this case, it is the ruling party's responsibility. The ANC should start now interrogating these issues and saying, why is there such a disjuncture between the demand market as well as the aspect of capital being supplied to meet the requirements of our growing economy, where we can then realize our radical economic transformation program?
Yeah, and Dr. Jammine, why shouldn't that be an imperative for government to want to have economic transformation and continue with all the other initiatives? Why is it that business sees this as some form of punishment or some form of, something that is going to make, erode their profits, as it were?
I don't think that business sees it as a that business does not see the need for radical economic transformation. I think that if the right initiatives were put in place, business would indeed commit a lot of those funds towards assisting in social upliftment. It's just the way in which it is being viewed antagonistically rather than sympathetically by the powers that be, that, if you go to someone and you say, I want your money, he's not going to give it to you. If you say, well, you've got a lot of money, let's see how you can actually assist us. What can we do to actually make you apply that money and fund it in such a way as to assist us in a manner that is mutually beneficial? I think that you could get you could make a lot more progress than the kind of stick approach rather than the carrot approach that is being adopted at present.
But the point is that, there has been an appeal, and as you were saying, the new finance minister doing his own roadshow and trying to salvage the situation, and there hasn't been any break really from a policy position as such. It seems there has been more continuation from what has been in place. Dr. Jammine, are you of the sense that business views it differently?
I think business does view it differently. They ask themselves, why was Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan replaced by Malusi Gigaba if there were not ulterior motives that actually override the what they see as honest attempts by Gordhan to try and build up a solid relationship between business and the public sector.
Ever recover from that perception, that there's only one finance minister this country ever?
I think we've had great finance ministers. All the finance ministers in South Africa have performed up to their ability. It is not related to the finance minister, it is related to the economy of South Africa. We are not held ransom by individuals. And in this case, I'm not excluding any finance minister. I'm saying all finance ministers have performed to their capability. But we are now in a different growth trajectory. From a South African point of view, we are extremely hurt. You must understand, we are the people who are suffering. 80% of our people and members are coming to us and asking us, you are the people who are fronting in front and talking about these programs and the ANC as well as South Africa as an economy that's supposed to be growing. And yet you are failing us. We have family members, by the way, Cindy, that are poor and will never come out of poverty unless something is done to improve their conditions. White people in Sandton do not have that problem. White monopoly capital sitting in London and in other foreign destinations and sitting in South Africa and Stellenbosch and Plattenberg Bay are not having such problems. We are the ones who get confronted to say you are moving in the right circles, but you're not making the right initiatives. So where must it stop? Should we go continuously begging at the doorstep of capital to say, please assist us in the growth? Or should we take a new trajectory, which we call radical economic transformation, and start our own economy based on the principles and the laws that are applied?
Okay,
Reserve Bank must give us the new bank licenses, must give us the financial licenses to start operating our businesses and being successful in our own economy.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. That's Dr. Azza Jammine, Chief Economist with Econometrics, joining us via outside broadcast facility, and Adil Nchabeling is President of Transform RSA. Tony Modise, unfortunately we lost him there, experiencing some technical glitches, but he's a market commentator. And you at home, thanks for joining us.